When we think of the Roman Republic, we think of invincibility. We think of disciplined legions, tactical genius, and relentless conquest. But at the end of the 2nd century BC, Rome was gripped by a panic so profound it threatened to unravel the Republic itself. It was a period known as the Cimbrian Terror. Before the legendary reforms of Gaius Marius, before the famous battles of Aquae Sextiae and Vercellae, and even before the catastrophic defeat at Arausio, there was a battle that served as a brutal wake-up call. It was a disaster that saw a Roman consul slain, his army annihilated, and the survivors subjected to the most profound humiliation a Roman soldier could endure. This is the story of the Battle of Burdigala, a forgotten defeat that not only exposed the deep flaws in the old Roman army, but also lit the fire of panic that would force Rome to abandon its traditions and create the professional war machine that would conquer the known world. The story begins not with an invasion, but with a migration. Around 113 BC, a massive confederation of tribes, the Cimbri and the Teutones, left their ancestral lands in what is now Denmark. Driven by floods or overpopulation, this was not an army, but an entire people on the move, with hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children, their possessions piled high in great wagons. They wandered south, looking for new lands to settle. Their first encounter with Rome in 113 BC at Nerea was a disaster for the Romans. They reappeared in Gaul, threatening Roman interests and allies. Joining them in this mass migration was a fierce Celtic tribe from a land we now call Switzerland, the Tigurini. The Roman Republic by this time had established a province in southern Gaul, the Gallia Narbonensis. It was a vital land link to their provinces in Spain. When the Tigurini, allies of the Cimbri, began to move into the lands of Rome's allies, the Allobroge, Rome had to respond. To the Senate, this was not a desperate migration. It was a barbarian invasion to be crushed. In 107 BC, the task of dealing with the Tigurini fell to one of the year's consuls, Lucius Cassius Longinus. Longinus was a proud noble, and he brought with him a full consular army, at least one, possibly 2 legions, plus their allied auxiliaries totaling over 10,000 men. He was aggressively marching into enemy-held territory to punish the Tigurini. His army was the old Roman army. It was a militia force conscripted from landowners who could afford their own equipment. It was not the professional, full-time fighting force that we associate with Julius Caesar. It was an army that relied on rigid formations and open-field battles, and it was led by a politician whose military experience was not a prerequisite for his command. Longinus marched his army deep into Aquitania in southwestern Gaul, pushing the Tigurini back towards the borders of their territory. Near Burdigala, the modern-day city of Bordeaux, the Tigurini had seemingly been cornered. Longinus, confident of an easy victory against a barbarian rabble, prepared to engage them. What he didn't know was that the Tigurini had lured him into a perfect trap. The Roman sources, including Caesar, who wrote about it 50 years later, are clear. This was no pitched battle, it was an ambush. The Tigurini, led by their chieftain Divico, had drawn the Romans into a disadvantageous position, likely a wooded valley or a narrow defile. The Roman column, stretched out and encumbered by its massive baggage train, was suddenly attacked from all sides. The Tigurini, fighting on their home turf, rained javelins and arrows down on the legionaries before crashing into their vulnerable flanks. Panic seized the Roman line. The legionaries, unable to form their famous maniples, were cut down where they stood. In the chaotic fighting, the consul himself, Lucius Cassius Longinus, was killed. His senior general, the legate Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus, who happened to be the grandfather of Julius Caesar's future wife, was also struck down. The Roman army, leaderless and broken, was completely routed. A small, terrified remnant, led by a junior officer named Gaius Popilius Laenus, managed to fight their way back to the relative safety of their marching camp. The battle was over, but the humiliation was about to begin. The surviving Roman soldiers were trapped, surrounded, with no hope of escape. The Tigurini chieftains offered terms. The legate Popilius, to save the lives of the men under his command, was forced to accept a peace that would become one of the most infamous in Roman history. The Romans had to surrender half of all their property. They had to hand over noblemen as hostages, and then they had to endure the yoke. The yoke was a symbol of total subjugation, a ritual of ultimate shame. The surviving Roman soldiers were forced to strip off their armor and one by one duck and walk beneath the low-slung spear, signifying that they were now as broken and subjugated as a draft animal. For a Roman soldier, whose dignitas or dignity was everything, this was a fate worse than death. This was the Cassian disaster, the calamitas that would be seared into Rome's memory. When news of this disaster, a consul dead, an army destroyed, and its survivors subjected to the yoke, reached Rome, it caused a political earthquake. This defeat, combined with other Cimbrian victories, shattered the Roman illusion of invincibility. 2 years later, in 105 BC, an even greater catastrophe would occur at the Battle of Burdigala. The Republic was on its knees, facing an existential threat. It was in this climate of absolute terror that the Roman people cast aside all laws and traditions. They turned to one man, a new man from outside the old nobility, a brilliant, battle-hardened general named Gaius Marius. They elected him consul an unprecedented 5 years in a row, breaking all of their own laws to save them. The Battle of Burdigala was more than just a defeat. It was a symptom of a sickness in the Roman military system. The humiliation the survivors endured was the catalyst for change. It was the Cimbrian Terror, starting with disasters like Burdigala, that gave Marius the political cover to enact his famous reforms, to forge a new professional army, loyal not to the state, but to their general. This new army would save Rome, and one day it would be the same army that men like Caesar would use to tear the Republic apart.